Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday. I am going to take you guys through different workshops that I've done over time, talking about motivation and ways that you guys can kind of find that motivation. And some of this stuff is based on like actual training that I've had, that things that we would do at 24 Hours Fitness to try to sell people. So like these questions, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post in the comments below, so that you guys can go through them and start to kind of understand where you're coming from, and that's going to be a big part about motivation is understanding what does motivate you and what doesn't. What is doing more harm than good, and controlling your thoughts and your feelings about whatever it is that you're trying to be motivated about. In this case, we're talking about either exercise or practicing wrestling or anything along those lines. And the first kind of thing that we get at here is, this first part of the workshop is why we don't do what it is that we're supposed to do or what we want to do. And this comes out of an example that my psychologist has actually, and I kind of talked about back and forth a couple of years ago, that we were talking about. She actually given me the example of the fact that she's not very good at flossing, and I was starting to think about that and why don't we like to brush our teeth as much as we want to? Why don't we floss as much as we know we should? And so here's the things that we have when it comes to that in particular. Why don't we want to floss, right? For one, it's kind of disgusting. You're flicking bacteria-ridden food all over the place when you're doing it. It's not comfortable on your hands. It's tedious. We don't necessarily feel we're very good at it potentially. Sometimes there's blood, and we might be concerned about that. And I don't really like the feel of floss in my hands and all that. So when we look at, well, why should you floss? Well, for one, it's disgusting to have shit in your teeth. You'll get cavities if you don't. The dentist will lecture you if you don't. And if you're looking at that, all of those things, whether it's on the list of things why we don't floss and why we should floss, they kind of play into each other, don't they? So what I'm saying is that, there isn't any sort of reward system set up there, right? And when we talk about reward systems, and this is one of the things that's a little bit harder to quantify is what is a reward, right? So when we're looking at things that we're supposed to be doing, potentially for the example of flossing, well, I should floss because I want to have good teeth, right? So that's going to be like something that's more positive. It's something that you can look forward to, but it's not going to necessarily work in this particular example. Why? Because we're already starting off with good teeth, right? So maintenance things like that are kind of things that are like, right? I don't necessarily want to do. So, one of the things that she and I discussed, because she was actually the one that had problems with flossing, I do too, but she had brought it up as their own example of something that she struggles with. And the thing about that is that, we talked about, making maybe a social thing that's going on there. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, you floss together, and maybe you do flossing races, or you do something that adds a fun element into the flossing. Or you like have a point system, and you like more days in a month that you do your flossing. If you beat the other person, they have to take you out to a movie or something like that. So now there's a competition element into it. So you've got that reinforcement from somebody else that is involved in the same process, and probably somebody that's also struggling with the flossing and whatnot. So that's one thing that you could do, is that we are looking at something that creates a reward system, but sometimes we don't always have that. A lot of times some people say, well, if I do my workout today, then I can go out and I can have pizza. Well, food is a really, really bad motivator, because you are rewarding yourself with usually junk food for doing the good thing. But the good thing is hampered by the fact that you're eating junk food. So we don't necessarily want to use that as a reward. Um, and one of the things I have written down here is, why do people who claim to avoid drama always seem to be surrounded by drama, right? Well, when we kind of navigate towards people who are high drama and have that in our lives, that's something that we're subconsciously looking for. But we're also when we are hyper focused on the drama itself, we're always looking for the negativity, and so when we are tuned into that, we're more likely to find it, if that makes any sense. So when we're looking at, okay, why should we exercise or why should we train? I'm going to tell you one of the things that keeps me from training as much as I should when it comes to jiu-jitsu. One of it is I believe I might have asthma, and I think that I may have had COVID back in March, so my lungs have lost elasticity, so I get winded very easily these days, and that is a very uncomfortable feeling. When you get winded, you get too low on oxygen, you start getting nauseous. I had gastritis for almost 10 years, still have a little bit of that, but not as bad. I just have to watch what I eat and all that. But when I would work out and whatnot, I get nauseous all the time, and one of the most uncomfortable feelings in the world for me is that nausea. And if I did more cardiovascular training, if I did roll more often, I train more often in grappling, my body's going to adjust to that, and I'm not going to get nauseous as much, if at all. And my lung capacity is going to improve and all that. And so these are positives that I can actually look forward to. But if I am focusing on the close hand discomfort, then I'm less likely to do the steps that are going to help me move to the future. So, why should we exercise? Again, these are examples of reasons why we might be telling ourselves the wrong thing when it comes to trying to become motivated. So, exercise prevents diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancers, lung disease, osteoporosis, etc., etc., etc. Like it has all kinds of benefits to our health that go on forever and ever and ever. The other one is because we're fat. Okay, so these, even though we say that we're preventing these diseases, right? They're all negatives that we're trying to avoid. So we're focusing on the negatives because we're fat. That's focusing on a negative, because we can't like I can't run a mile. Might be something I can totally run a mile, but if maybe you can't run a mile and you're saying, well, I can't run a mile, therefore I must do more cardio. Well, that's going to be a negative, right? Or I don't find myself attractive, so I should exercise so that I can feel more attractive. And so why don't we exercise? Well, it takes a lot of times, it's uncomfortable, and we might feel by going to the gym that we are being judged. Now, one thing I want to really kind of bring up with you guys when it comes to being judged in the gym, and it's one thing I really wish people understood, is that nobody's in the gym because they're where they want to be. Right? There's probably a few guys that are there for maintenance, but generally speaking, guys, and this goes back a little bit into the idea of what is exercise and what is training, right? What is the difference between the two of them? Exercise is like going to a Les Mills class, and the thing about like Les Mills classes is that they are designed so that anybody can step into them at any point in time and be able to do the workout safely and basically keep up with the rest of the class. Well, if you are more advanced and you go into a Les Mills class, you're going to be bored. You're not going to start meeting your ends. Now, it will help you in maintenance, right? Because you're at least getting out and you're doing something, but you're not moving towards a goal, right? When you take those classes, you might, if you're completely deconditioned and you haven't done any fitness ever before in your life, but generally speaking, they're not designed for you to have a lot of progress over the rest of your life, right? So you need to have things that progress a lot more. But I have digressed and I've gone completely off topic there. But when people go into the gym, they're there for the most part because they want to be stronger, they want to be faster, they want to lose weight, they want to feel more attractive. A lot of those like bigger bodybuilder types guys are very, very insecure. There's a it's not a scientific term, but there's a term that goes around called bigorexia when it comes to bodybuilders and that type of thing, and it's not an official psychological term, but it's it's pretty much the same thing as anorexia, right? So anorexia being this feeling that you're always too fat, and so you are going to have disordered eating to try to stay as thin as possible, usually to unhealthy levels, and often includes bulimia. So what is bigorexia? It's kind of the flip side of that, is where you have a form of body dysmorphia, a disconnect from what your body actually is and how you feel about it, and you feel like you're too small, you're too insignificant, and it's part of kind of a toxic masculinity, where people think that they're so small and they're so insecure about their inferiority in size that they just have to keep going, and they have to keep building and building and building and building until they get, and then eventually they'll start using steroids, they'll overeat, they'll start, I actually had a friend about 2 years ago who suffered from this, who had taken anabolic steroids and had a stroke. And he's now, after 2 years, able to like talk and have conversations. He can, but for like a good like year there, he couldn't swallow food. He had to have liquid foods, or he had to be fed intravenously because he could not swallow. The swallow reflex was gone because of the stroke. And so that was kind of the product of this condition of bigorexia, where it's this body dysmorphia where you make unhealthy choices in order to try to get where you want to be.